Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. Now, if you have been watching the news, if you have been just kind of looking around at things that are happening around us, you are noticing, if you're anything like me, that DEI is truly under attack, right? Anything that goes wrong in this country, in the world right now, is being blamed on DEI. And so, it made me really think, and as we've done some other episodes, is DEI really needing a communications plan? Is it needing crisis management? Is it needing something else? And so today we are going to unpack that a bit with our guest, Toni Harrison, who is the CEO of Etched Communications, works in crisis management, and really want to dive into what is DEI needing today? Because we know, as I've been saying for the last few weeks, this work will continue to happen. And so we need to be repositioned. So Toni, I want to welcome you. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's delightful to be here.
Thank you. So for those of the audience who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into crisis management work?
Absolutely. Well, my name is Toni Harrison, which we just covered, and my firm, Etched Communications, specializes in culture, causes, and crisis. Culture, as we think about multicultural segments and campaigns, sometimes that's race or ethnicity, sometimes that's gender, sometimes it's the culture of an industry or an environment in which you work. Causes like affordable housing, causes that really contribute to our society. And then crisis management. Crisis management has become the lead part of our practice since 2020, when we really saw a reckoning happening from George Floyd to Jamal Khashoggi to everything in between. Crisis management has really risen to the top of our practice.
I love that you focus on those three areas, because for a long time, pre-2020, right, anytime there was something that happened in the world, I would say a majority of people didn't necessarily think of it as a crisis. It was just like, okay, yeah, we'll just kind of brush that aside. But then what has happened is during that summer of 2020, we become very hyper-focused because everybody was kind of looking and seeing, and you couldn't gloss over, some of the things that were happening, all of those, the loss of life for reasons that should not have been. And so having that lens of culture as a part of crisis management, I think is just critical, in the work that we do. And so, it makes me think. So part of my background was in marketing. And part of the reason why I left corporate was because I was told, your job is to make things look pretty. And I'm like, oh, that's not necessarily what I'm supposed to be doing. But, part of what I was doing was highlighting that not everyone has the same experience. And so when that summer of 2020 happened, it was this very interesting take on, okay, what is our communications plan supposed to be when we've never spoken about these things before? And how can we do it in a way that makes it look pretty? So we are now in 2024, and DEI is under attack, right? So I think we've kind of gotten past this, let's sugarcoat things that are happening. What are some of the things that you all are doing at a baseline level with your clients to make sure that they're understanding this isn't about sugarcoating?
Wow, that's very layered. So let's unpack it, right?
Okay.
So I think the first thing is, in 2020, what we saw was a lot of organizations felt as though they had to do it. Maybe they didn't believe in it. Maybe they didn't see its value, but they felt like they were at risk or putting their businesses, companies, images at risk for not doing it, for not accepting and embracing DEI. And so when I think when we talk about that segment, we see how it is very easy for them to step back from that, especially when we have a political climate that is advising them to do so and saying that is the best direction, right? So we have this group who I'm going to do it to check the box because I have to, because I don't want people to say I'm not this or affect my business, my sales, what have you.
Cancel me, right?
Now what we have is we're seeing it organically affect other areas as well. It's not just about a workplace. We're seeing how it affects universities, how it affects scholarships, how it even affects programs that are allowed to happen that were previously for networking or what have you. So we're seeing it attacked in so many different ways. And it goes back to experience. What are you experiencing on the ground? What is affecting your experience? That's where we get into diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's very easy to always instantly say DEI, that's about race, but it's not.
Right.
If I have an employee on my team who is hearing impaired, I have to make accommodations for him or her. The same way a school system has to make accommodations for a child who has dyslexia or ADHD. And what's happening under this attack is we are slowly starting to attack those areas as well.
You know, as you're talking, one of the things that really comes to mind is, you know, there has been this shift in language, right? Where DEI does absolutely mean all of those things. But for the last few months, it seems as if DEI equals race or DEI equals ethnicity. And so when you're seeing these attacks, when the Supreme Court kind of rolled back affirmative action based on race, then a lot of organizations felt that that was kind of their opportunity to really get rid of anything that was race-based. You started seeing in several states this, you know, we're going to get rid of DEI across the board. And I've said this on the show, you know, several times. It just blows my mind in the state that you live in, right? Like the governor is rolling back these DEI efforts while sitting in a wheelchair.
He is. And in fact, if you look at the policies he's enacted over time, you will also see he's rolled back rights for those in wheelchairs and access to buildings and building codes. You know, the way DEI works, when we really talk about equity and inclusion, we're not talking about taking something from someone else. We're talking about making sure everyone has the opportunity or the access. So let's take a look at Governor Abbott and say, wow, well, if you can service real estate developers and roll back so they don't have to spend as much building wheelchair ramps, you're taking away access, another human being's access to the same things everyone else has access to. And it's so dangerous. It's dangerous because it will eventually affect so many of us, maybe even all of us at one point or another, whether that's a disability, whether that's sexual orientation, maybe it's a family member with a disability, and we're now impacted by that. It's very, very dangerous, and it is so much more than race or ethnicity.
Yeah. And, you know, so one of the things that immediately comes to mind when I start thinking about these things as well, too, I live in Maryland. And so when the bridge collapsed a few months back and DEI was blamed for that. You know, recently there was the assassination attempt and DEI was blamed for that because there were women in Secret Service. I have a friend who's been in Secret Service for almost 20 years, right? One of my college classmates. And so it's not a new thing. Women have been in Secret Service for a long time, but for some reason right now, this is because this goes along with the narrative that, that is in place. What do we need to do at this point, right? Because now it seems like if anything goes wrong, DEI is going to be blamed, and it's fodder for this is why we need to get rid of this. To me, I'm like, I don't know if it's not a communications plan, right? Are we in that crisis management space? Are we like, what is it that we need to do? Because I feel as if we all know there's something that needs to happen, but we don't know what it is.
So when we look at what happened with the assassination attempt, let's just examine that for 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
A day and a half later, we're saying the women officers didn't respond fast enough. We have the head of Secret Service saying, that's because DEI hires, we had to hire women. They weren't fast enough. Mm-hmm. Never did we consider anything else except that the women weren't as fast as the men. All of these things happening on the ground, right? How easy was it to just attack the women? That is when I say we need a crisis plan. Crisis plan, we are in crisis mode with DEI. It is under attack. We see it in Project 2025. Let's eliminate it altogether. We see more than half of our states passing some sort of legislation or proposing some sort of legislation to make it so you can't even talk about it. University administrators in Iowa can't even talk about it.
Yeah.
How's that for freedom of speech? Yeah. So when we say a crisis plan, what we're talking about is protecting what DEI is and what it stands for. And we're also protecting the rights of all of those people we just spoke about. Yes, we're talking about Blacks. Yes, we're talking about the Latin community. We're also talking about disabled, veterans, LGBTQ+, neurodivergence. We're talking about someone all of us know, our neighbors and friends. But how we approach that really has to do with where we are in the process. Here's what I mean. It is a lot harder to convince that executive who never thought DEI was anything but something he or she had to do to check the box because it was 2020 and they were receiving pressure. We're never going to convince that person as easily that this is something that matters for their company, that matters for their other employees. What we have to do is really ignite those who will carry the torch, because silence does speak volumes. And right now we're talking about the noise. The noise is DEI is bad. Oh, it's hurting people. Oh, it's taking away opportunities from those who should have it to give it to those who don't deserve it. I have no idea how any rational thinker comes up with that. But
I'm still trying to figure out if I have a Black job, but we'll.
Oh, yeah. Well. As we sit here with our Black jobs.
Right.
Fighting for them, right? And so when we talk about a crisis plan, I think the biggest opportunity is igniting that base, because it is about having that equal voice. We need to take our equity in this conversation. We need to be elevating. It requires a strategy. Yeah. We're not going to convince said CEO that this is important and you need to hire if that's not what he or she already believes. But guess what? There are a lot of Americans out there who do see the value in DEI, who do know that it contributes positively to our workplaces and to the environments in which we operate. And that is where the opportunity lies. Crisis management isn't always, oh, it's bad, woe is us, no, sometimes it's about where is the opportunity, and let's make that bigger than what our adversaries are saying right now. And that is where we have the opportunity to win. That is actually What helped DEI rise to the top in 2020? Yes, it was the result of a senseless act of violence, one that should have never happened.
Yeah.
But look at how loud our voices were.
Yeah.
We stepped back from that a little bit, and it happens, right? We all get busy in day-to-day lives. Things change. We have an election. We start looking at other things, but we can't let that go. We have to reignite that base and bring it back to the forefront.
I absolutely love that, because I think what it does is, as you said, right, we're reacting to the noise right now, but there's no counter noise. And so it's, how do you balance that? One of the things that I have been, I want to say, grappling with, conversations that I've had with other practitioners lately have been, I know quite a few white men that are in DEI roles that truly believe in this. And I'm like, there is so much power in that, because now you have the same audience on opposite sides, right? You can't just say that this is, Black women or Latino men, doing all the talking. When you have someone that looks like you, that has an opposing view, it starts to tamper down. Mm-hmm. Right? It starts to also pull apart this, we are all united, when in actuality, it's not there. So I love the fact that you're saying there needs to be a louder voice on the opposite side. And the beauty and the diversity of those voices are important. And it's not just those that are from marginalized communities that are constantly speaking up. It has to be some of those majority voices that are a part of it as well, and pulling them away from, like, no, that is not the norm, right? That is not my belief. And so how do we step away from that? So, it's interesting, because we now have several months before the election. And I think a lot of organizations are kind of in this pause mode, because they're not quite sure what's going to happen come, November. So what would you say to an organization that is just like, I'm not quite sure what to do. If this goes away, then we have to get rid of it all, or we don't want to get rid of it all. How do we move forward? How do you help organizations kind of figure out their voice during these unsettled times?
Sure. This is something we've actually worked with a lot of organizations in the Fortune 500 about this very topic, because what we're seeing two positions. We're seeing those who say, hey, we want to embrace this. We want to keep it moving forward, but we're a little scared. Mm-hmm. We're scared to get it wrong on both sides. We're scared to get it wrong with those we're trying to engage. What if we say something wrong? It's a very fine line. People are very sensitive. The other side is, well, what if we embrace this? We have an election, it goes away, then we're seen as the organization who supported something that is now a faux pas, something, mm-hmm. Words we shouldn't say. Here's the deal. The first thing an organization must do is get to its value system. Yes. Yeah. If your value system is truly about investing in your teams, investing in the markets or audiences in which you serve, then you have to be true to that. One organization we worked with came to me and they said, Toni, listen, we want to do this. We see the benefit of it, but we also cannot alienate the groups we currently serve. And we know majority of them fall in one category through our research. Now we're talking about a very large multinational organization. Through our research, most of the audience we currently serve might go against us. What are we going to do now? Because we want to do it, but our current customers who fall in this very conservative, realm, mm-hmm. they're not going to like that. So the first thing we did was start with researching and really looking at what are those pathways. You do not have to alienate one group to serve another. but you do have to be smart and strategic about it. Where are the opportunities? See, we seem to forget something when we talk about this.
Yeah.
The complex at the end of the day is very simple. It's about people. We're talking about a human being on the other side. Your current audience is here. You want to service this audience. Why? Well, they're in a completely different place. Give them the message they need to hear from you. Now, I know it can't conflict with the message over here that you've been giving to your set audience, but one doesn't have to discount the other.
Right.
If you were sticking to your value system as a company or as an organization, it's not one or the other. You can do both. But first, you have to know your value system and you have to meet that audience or segment where they are. That's the key. And that's where we start.
Yeah. It's getting out of that either or mentality to a yes and, right? Like we can serve both in meaningful ways. And it just reminds me, earlier this week, there was a company who the CEO decided to put out an email that was very much leaning toward one political candidate versus another. And the feedback, what was interesting about watching what happened, because this was an email that went out to all of their clients, was, this is the candidate that I support. And if you buy a t-shirt from me, it'll support this candidate. Yeah, we got some other folks that work here too that support this one, but whatever. And it was just interesting for me to watch the comments and how many people said, you know what? I loved working with this company before. I didn't need to know the politics. And the fact that you're now trying to make money off of us to support a candidate that we don't necessarily support. Right now, I'm pulling all of my money. I'm not going to use you anymore as a client. And the CEO, rather than being reflective, and folks that listen to the show know I'm always talking about doing that inner work, doubled down. And one of my friends was saying, you know what? I hate to be customer service right now. I hate to be their marketing communications team right now. Right. I would hate to be, because now you're having to deal with that backlash. And in these moments of, I understand the passion, but if you go back to the values of the organization, that supersedes or should supersede the values of one person, even if that is your leader. And so now this company is having to deal with just this huge backlash of people saying, we don't want to work with you anymore. Right. And so when there is this binary approach to things, people feel they have to choose. Whereas what I'm hearing you say is, if you stay with your values, there's something that everyone is going to agree upon at some point, and that might be your path forward. That might be the opportunity to connect everyone to you and the greater vision. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, but in your example,
Okay.
I would say the CEO was very clear on the value system they supported. And it sounds like it didn't matter what the outcome was to said CEO. My value system is this, and this is what I support. So you have to be prepared for the ramifications of that. The same way you have to be prepared for ramifications when your product isn't connecting because you didn't consider other audiences. When your sales are diminishing because said group says, you know what, we're not taking that, so we're not going to support you.
Right.
Okay.
It's a calculated risk.
Value system, if you will.
Right.
There'll be consequences.
Yeah. It's a calculated risk, even if he may
Very
not have
much so.
calculated it. But yeah.
But you know what? Sometimes I say, we thank those people. Thank you for showing me who you are. Now I will make the decision on how I will take my next steps with you, your company, your brands, based on what you showed. So thank you.
Yeah. And that is the sentiment I think I saw the most, was I appreciate you sharing. So now I will go look for someone else to service this need for my business and my organization. So Toni, I'm going to do a little bit of a pivot. And, this work seems to me, right? I'm not in crisis management. And anytime I see crisis management, I think Olivia Pope. So, but it's stressful. It's high stress. It is also this constant understanding the narratives, understanding like it's constantly moving. What are the things that you do to take care of you? Like, how do you fill your cup?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because it took me a long time to figure that out. And I will say burnout almost led to my blowout. Because especially as a Black woman, it can feel as though if I take a break, I may miss something. I may lose something. I need to power myself to perform all the time. I don't take lightly, and I will say it all the time. In many instances, as Black women, we do have to prove ourselves twice as much. We have to show up stronger, to show that we can do it, that we can compete. And that takes a lot. And it puts a lot of pressure on us when we say, oh, can I really take a break? Oh, will I miss a stride? Will I miss a step? And the first thing I had to do was learn how to calm the noise. When you're dealing with crisis management, so much is thrown at you. Your days are unpredictable. The number of times I will receive a phone call at 3 or 4 a.m. from a producer saying, said client has done this, we need a comment before the morning show at 5 a.m. Or the time a client will call and say, I know it's midnight, cameras are standing outside of our building, they're ready to protest. What are we going to do? We can't predict it. So what we have to do is predict ourselves, right? First thing, knowing yourself, knowing when you need to take a step back, knowing when and feeling strong enough to do so, knowing when to say, hey, you know what? Even if I keep pushing right now, it's not going to be as good, and I'm not going to enjoy it because I'm so tired. I'm going to take a step back, and centering yourself and figuring out, what does that look like for you? For me, calming the noise was truly that. Sometimes sitting in the silence to hear yourself breathe. Small things you can do in the moment, especially if you're on an active crisis. Those are 24/7 sometimes. Taking a moment, step aside, hear yourself breathe. Those things in the moment. But afterwards, giving yourself the grace to recover. Yeah. We are all human beings. So we're all going to get tired. We're all going to get stressed at some point, right? But knowing, hey, I need to recover from that, and recognizing this is how I'm feeling. So I'm going to face it till I make it. That goes for the work, and that goes for ourselves too, because guess what? If you don't do that, your work will suffer. Your outputs will suffer. Your attitude will suffer. Your sleep will suffer. Everything just starts to take a tumble. So what's something I tell myself, my father was a coach. And so I grew up in a house with pep talks and this and that. We must power ourselves to perform. And our performances look different based on who we are. What that means for one person may mean something for someone else. But we must take the time to recognize what it takes to be our strongest and power ourselves that way.
Yeah. That's that inner work, right? That's that knowing thyself. And you said, 2 words that my audience knows, like space and grace. Give yourself that space and the grace to know, okay, this may not be it, or this is what I need, or, whatever it is, but you have to know yourself in order to be able to do that. And I appreciate the power of the pause. That's the other phrase that, you hear often, is sometimes in crisis, the best thing you can do is just pause and like, okay, let me take a deep breath, let me center myself before I respond. Because there's so many of us that 0 to 60, and then thinking back through it, you may have created another crisis in the process. And so really just being intentional in, okay, what makes sense for me right now?
And intention is everything. Make sure you're celebrating your successes.
Yeah.
Take the time, recognize, I did a great job. That was great. I'm tired. I'm stressed.
Right.
Great job. Take the time to do that. We must elevate that for ourselves as well.
Yeah, I love that. So Toni, if people wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, you can find me and Etched just about anywhere online. We are on all social networks, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and that is at Etched Effect. On my personal LinkedIn, which is just LinkedIn/Toni Harrison, I frequently write a lot of articles on these topics, from topics about, communication and words that we're using that we don't know have racial origins that maybe we should take out of our vocabulary, to sometimes just sharing tips from the trenches. You can learn a lot in crisis management, whether that's about personalities or how to expect the unexpected. So I hope your listeners will check us out, and feel free to reach out to me at any time. As we started this conversation, we talked about elevating voices, and we talked about making sure that we are out there countering the narrative that DEI needs to go away. And that comes from us working together. So I look forward to connecting with everyone out there as we fight this charge together.
I love it. Toni, thank you so much for your time and having this conversation, because I think that this is something that we all need to be very cognizant of, right? We need to elevate our voices. We need to be able to sing this song together, be on the same page, or at least in the same book, right? Of what DEI, the positive side of DEI, and making sure that we have that counter voice to all the noise that's out there right now. So thank you so much for joining us.
Having me.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope that you are able to find the space and grace that you need for yourself, be able to write down a few things that you think can help elevate DEI as we continue to do this work. And as always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. We are here every Tuesday at 5:15 Eastern. And until next time, have a good one.